Got another 65 reissue Deluxe Reverb amp in for some upgrades. And aside from everything else the owner wanted, he said the reverb was noisy. So someone tried to fix the reverb driver and really made things worse. So only one triode is working because the plate wire broke off, the plate connection. So that's probably at the root of the reverb woes. There's some burned wires in there. I'll be making that pretty. I'll be showing highlights of this repair because I've done so many of these. I'm not going to show step by step. I've already changed out the filter caps for FNTs and changed the 10K dropping resistors to some 2-watt Vichets. I just like to know that those are good, and the blue ones that Fender uses are probably fine for that purpose. I have had them burn, but those were in amps that had the IC caps, and once those IC caps begin to short, there's too much current for the 1-watt 10Ks that are in there. So, but anyway, 2-watt resistors are inexpensive. And while I was in the neighborhood, I just figured I'd make that nice. So I'm about to pull all the knobs, pull all the pots, and pull this board out and get to work on the preamp board. All right, this is the pots board. All the old solder is removed from the input jacks and the volume pots because that lead-free stuff doesn't hold up, and there's a lot of mechanical stress on those joints in particular. So those have been reflowed, and the components in the tone stack on each have been changed out. Well, not all of them. The caps have been changed, the 3 caps in each one. I left the bright cap, here, per the owner's request. The slope resistors, this is the stock half-watt that comes from Fender. This is the half-watt I put in here. I know the spec on this half-watt resistor. It's not just because it's pretty, but there's a significant voltage on a slope resistor in this circuit, and I wanted to have something that I knew I could trust. The 6.8K, that's fine. That's after the coupling caps. There's no DC and no current. There's no real current through this this slope resistor, but there's a lot of voltage on it. The treble caps have been changed out for Class 2 ceramics. It's a subtle difference, makes a difference. The IC brand cap's been changed out for Panasonics. And this one I did the values from the Super Reverb. On this one, it's the value from the Deluxe Reverb. Now, there is a whole cottage industry of people modding these Fenders and doing the Fromel mods and the Bill M mods, et cetera, et cetera. And I get in amps all the time that people have tried to do that, and they're all torn up because they're using these orange drops. How do you fit a 100 nanofarad and a 47 nanofarad cap in this space using caps this big? You don't, but people cram it in and do it from the other side and make big messes, and there's a lot of mass, more than a PCB can really support. And what people don't take into account is the lead diameter of this orange drop is much larger than the lead diameter the board was designed for. And so not only do you have a lot of stress on there, but it will tear up the pads and holes. It's just the wrong choice. This Panasonic here fits the size. It's the size it was designed for. It has the smaller diameter leads, very low mass, it's narrow. It sounds every bit as good as an orange drop, and it sounds better in practice in these amps because you're not tearing everything up to fit these things in. You know, I get these things in, and they're just kind of squeezed in place and made to kind of fit, and then they got big globs of glue everywhere, and you know, all that stress tears up the pads, just rips the traces and pads off the board. So I think that Bill M, rest in peace, had good intentions. As far as I know, Fromel had good intentions, and it's not necessarily their fault what people do with the information that they've put out into the world. But don't work on a PCB and just use the same caps you get away with working on an old eyelet board out of habit. Think about it. This is the lead spacing for this 100 nanofarad cap on the board, and that's the lead spacing of this orange drop This is a 715p, probably the most commonly used. And you cannot make that fit. You can bring them in and down, but then it's just a sign that that is not the right choice, not to mention the width of this one cap is wider than both the other caps used. And those Panasonics are 630 volt. The 47 and the 22 are polyester, just like the 715, not the 715, sorry, the 200 PS series and 418p. Normally I use the polyester for the 100 nanofarads as well, but given that it's 2021 and stock is crazy, I had to go polypropylene. Now the polypropylene is what you'd find in a 715 or 716p. It will sound just fine. And is this worlds better sounding than the original IC brand cap? I have found that cumulatively, you do get a nicer sound when you have all the ICs changed out for these Panasonics. And we're talking replacing a 25-cent cap with a 35-cent cap. We're not talking about $7 snake oil Mojo caps. Not calling out the Mojo tone caps. The Dijons are quite nice, but also physically too large for this application. Just there's a lot of hype about capacitors out there, and people paying crazy money for bumblebees in their Les Paul that make no difference, or people paying crazy money for brand new Les Pauls where Gibson has bumblebees in them, and it's a cheap Asian cap in a plastic body surrounding it that makes it look like the old bumblebees. So, you know, I don't care about that. The class 2 makes a difference. Knowing that the slope resistor is not going to fail makes a difference. Knowing that these are good and suitable for the application makes a big difference. And knowing that I can trust these solder joints is crucial. Also cleaned all the pots while I had it out. And of course, in stock form, none of the nuts were tight. So none of this was tight against the chassis, and in use would have been a lot of stress and would have broken all the solder joints. So when this goes back, it'll all be tight. Everything is removed from the board that's getting removed, or getting replaced rather. Some stuff is removed. Most of it's getting replaced. And much more importantly than the fact that it's getting replaced is that there is no damage to the traces and pads on the other side. That's the tricky bit with this. You don't want to make changes and end up doing damage. Now, before I put the new components back, I'm going to go in here and get all this. Well, it's not all this. It's not a lot, but get the flux off that's on the board so that I'll have clean solder joints. I just saw a couple here. I forgot to remove the excess solder, so let me do that first. Well, all the work I expected to do has been done, and all this stuff in the audio path has been upgraded, and all this stuff that draws too much current or generates heat off this board has been moved to the output sockets, octal sockets. That's the heater wires, screen grid resistors, grid stoppers moved to the grid, some heater balance resistors. I've talked about this in other videos, that shielded wire put in here. When I'm sure the amp is otherwise done, this stuff will get bundled up and secured in place. Look neat again. Just making sure it sounds good first before I button it up. So here's the normal channel, which is now pretty much that of the Super Reverb. And I'll show this for real in a different video with real mics where I can really turn it up once I'm sure everything's done. The vibrato channel originally had a very noisy reverb, and I showed you why. That's all fixed. So that's all sounding good. The only remaining issue, is the one thing I have not touched, is the tremolo. As soon as it is switched on, there's a ticking. And I imagine that the standard fix that I do on the 60s amps will also work on this. So let me try a cap across that roach and see if that ticking goes away. That's really the only remaining issue. And just of note, the tremolo in the reissue takes a while to turn off because they have a cap across the part that triggers it off, and it takes a while for that cap to drain a voltage. It's a weird design. I'm not sure why they did it. But I've got to fix that ticking, because even with the intensity off, as soon as that oscillator starts, that ticking is injected into everything else. So other than that, it sounded great. Came in with stock tubes, and except for a pair of Electro-Harmonic 636 GTs. We've got them biased, about 53% idle dissipation. Plate voltage is at 423, which is just about perfect for a Deluxe Reverb. And I think the amp's going to sound great. So I'm just going to try a fix for that roach setup, and hopefully that'll take care of it. Okay, the de-ticking was successful. This is just a temp-in 22 nanofarad. That's not what's going to be shipped out to the client. I don't want to make sure that the premise was correct before I cut anything to length, but I'm going to find a 10 nanofarad, which is usually more than sufficient, and you don't want to go too high. I could use the 22, prefer the 10, and rather than doing it across the roach, because I don't have eyelets here, I'm going to do it from the resistor lead that you see there to that cathode cap negative. That gives me something to attach to, and it'll be more than fine. And that takes away the tick, and that's a very good thing.